In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Wartales. We previously did a video for this game when it first entered early access in 2021, so about 3 years ago. The game has had its 1.0 version released in April of last year in 2023 and has been steadily adding content ever since, including its brand new update, the Skelmar Invasion, that just came out a few days ago, which I'll get into in a little bit in this video. The game currently has a 90% lifetime on Steam with over 24,000 reviews. So what is Wartales? Wartales is an incredibly complex and interesting game, but it's very hard to describe. There are not very many games out there like it. The best way that I can sort of describe it to you is that it's an adventure fantasy tale that kind of plays out like a digital board game more than anything else. And it's kind of like a mixture of Mount and Blade Bannerlord with something like XCOM. That's a probably really rough description of it, but I'll get into exactly what it is in a minute and try and break it down for you. But first, before I do that, a big shout out to Shiro Games for sponsoring this video. If for some reason you have not played Wartales yet and you love yourself some good turn-based action with a lot of adventure, definitely use our link below to support the channel. So the first thing that I want to say about Wartales is that it's not a heavily narrative experience. This is a game that relies very much on its exploration of the overworld map. An overworld map, again, that reminds me a lot of a board game where you're moving around on it and interacting with different locations, picking up quests, fighting enemies, and getting into enemy encounters. And it reminds me a little bit, why I mentioned it earlier, Mount and Blade in this regard, where you're moving around on this world map and things are taking place on the world map that are shaping the game, and then you jump into your combat when you're doing it. Now, obviously, Mount and Blade has real-time combat, and this has turn-based tactical combat, so it's a bit different. But it very much feels like a board game in this sense, and it relies on your sense of imagination and what you want to do with your characters in your playthrough, and you can kind of do what you want in this sandbox game within the confines of it. And I definitely think there is a market out there for this. I don't think everyone wants a heavily narrative experience. If anything that I've learned from the Dark Souls franchise is that even though there is a story behind it, not everyone pays attention to it, and a lot of people really enjoy those games for just their combat and mechanics. And I think there's a lot of people out there that would really love to not have to worry about too much dialogue and stuff like that, but they do have that sense of wonder and exploration of a medieval world that's ripe for exploration. Now, another point of note about this game is that players don't take on the role of any one character, but instead you control a band of characters from a host of different classes, each with their own specializations and skills that kind of further define their playstyle. The game now has a total of 8 classes, being Brute, Archer, Ranger, Swordsman, Warrior, Spearman, Pugilist, and Crossbowman. You begin the game with 4 different characters, but you can recruit more as you progress the game, and it allows for a wide variety of party combinations that can drastically shape your playthrough. If you've ever played a game where you make your party at the beginning of the game and then play through, there's not too many RPGs like this, but there's some of my favorite ones out there. Final Fantasy I comes to mind, Icewind Dale comes to mind, Wasteland 2 comes to mind, and even Solasta Crown of the Magister more recently is another game that allowed you to create a party at the beginning and then take your party throughout the game. So if you love that, then that's something you might enjoy about Wartales. And I think one of the things that I absolutely love about Wartales is the sense of progression that you feel as a player as you make your way through the game. Your team and your band of ragtag characters, it's constantly improving no matter what you do. You're gaining attribute points, you're learning professions, you're gaining skills, you're gaining new equipment. Every time you go anywhere, you're exploring the overworld, you're gaining knowledge points that then you can spend to kind of upgrade your general gameplay experience in the way that you see fit for your team. And as your characters get stronger and stronger and go deeper into their specializations and get better equipment, it gives you this XCOM-like feeling where you sort of become attached to these characters and you really don't want them to die. Like, it's like an automatic reload for you if they happen to fall during combat, which can happen in this game very easily. So it can be quite difficult to part with one of these characters. And I think this is probably the thing that XCOM is best known for, other than its 95% hit chance, obviously. But it's made people fall in love with their characters and their roster and become attached to them, but rarely do you see that in a fantasy game these days the way that you see it in Wartales. Obviously, I gave some examples earlier, but most of those games are very old. It's not a modern concept in most fantasy RPGs, so if you like that feeling and you want that in a fantasy or a medieval RPG, then Wartales definitely delivers there. And another thing that I really enjoy about Wartales is it has a lot of different activities in the game. in terms of exploration. There's just so much to do. You're moving around on the overworld. You have your combat, obviously. You can go into town, buy and sell things, pick up quests, steal things, attack caravans and rob them, become an outlaw in the game. You can lockpick, you can fish, you can chop wood, you can become a blacksmith, you can become an apothecary. There are just a lot of like little mini games within the game itself. A lot of times when you explore a location, you can mouse over things and interact them if you can find them, almost like a hidden mystery game. Like there's just so many little things added to this game that make it very unique that you never really feel like you're running out of things to do. And touching upon the combat a bit, the combat is obviously turn-based tactical combat, as I said in the beginning, and you can see from the gameplay. But the tactical combat is a bit deceiving in this game because it's deceptively simple, but it is extremely challenging at the same time. And I think one of the reasons for that is that the general combat, the way that it works in this game, is not hard to understand at all, but it's very difficult to succeed in, not only because the game is hard, it's not an easy game, but because a lot of your success in combat depends on a lot of decisions that you made outside of combat and whether you prepared for battle appropriately. It's getting rarer and rarer in modern games these days, particularly RPGs, to see decisions or consequences of things that you do outside of combat affect combat. Games are becoming more and more streamlined and simplified so that players have less of a chance to fail, and therefore they feel better about their games. Wartales is not that sort of game. It allows you to fail, and it allows you to learn from your failure and accumulate knowledge through your failure in order to become better at the game, and part of that is through preparing outside of combat. And part of the ways that you prepare outside of combat are because of the game's survival mechanics. Your characters need to eat regularly, they need to be healed from their wounds after combat, you need to repair their equipment so that they have more armor when they're in combat, because this doesn't just automatically come back. And for some reason, this kind of reminded me of like Oregon Trail a bit. I don't know why. But essentially, like when you go into town, you know, you're going to buy food, you're going to stock up on your food supply, you're going to stock up on repair items and healing medicine so that when you go out and you get into combat skirmishes, you can feed your troops, you can heal them up and repair their equipment so that when they go into the next battle, they have a higher chance of success rather than just being banged up from battle to battle and never doing any of these things, which will often result in the death of a character or several characters, which is devastating. You can also find food out on the landscape by attacking animals and getting meat from them or going fishing and things like that. And for some reason, this whole thing just kind of reminded me of Oregon Trail, except for the fact that, you know, you don't usually die of scurvy. And I think the last thing that really puts Wartales into this higher echelon of turn-based games is the fact that it has multiplayer. It has cooperative multiplayer in this game, meaning that you can get together with your friends and experience this all together, going around on the landscape, fighting battles together, fighting over who gets what loot and, you know, who's going to do what strategy, etc., and which profession each character is going to be and what class and, you know, how you want to do your background for each character. All this stuff is possible in multiplayer in this game, and some of the best RPGs out there right now have multiplayer. Baldur's Gate, Divinity, these games that add, you know, go a step further to add multiplayer to them are in another league, and I think Wartales belongs there as well. Now, the game has also had several paid DLCs added since its release in April of last year. These include The Pits, The Tavern Opens, Pirates of Beleriand, and the latest, The Skelmar Invasion, which adds sieges to the game. However, there's also been a lot of free updates in this time, including the crossbow and pugilist classes being added. The level cap has been raised in this last update that came out on December 10th with the Skelmar Invasion, that now increases the level cap of your characters to level 15 and adds new specializations to the game. There have also been more map varieties added for battles and more interactive items added for battles as well as the brewer profession and other quality of life changes and improvements in that year-and-a-half stretch. What this means is that there's a staggering amount of content for this game in its current state, and even if you already own the game and maybe you picked it up when early access first came out or maybe a couple years ago when the game was still in early access, definitely probably want to check it out now as there's been, again, a lot of free content added and see how the game plays compared to how it played then. It's definitely a game that allows for multiple playthroughs the way it's structured because of that kind of board game sandbox feel that the game has, where you're going to go around and make different decisions and explore in different directions and have a different party makeup each time that can really determine like how your playthrough goes. So that wraps up our latest video on Wartales. I want to know what you guys think about it. Have you been playing this game? Have you played it since it released in early access? If you do own the game, have you picked up some of these DLCs? What do you make of this game? Is it a bit of a hidden gem in your opinion? I think it is. And again, big shout out to Shiro Games for sponsoring this video. Again, if you guys haven't played it yet, but you're interested in it, it is on sale on Steam right now, I think for half off, which is like $17 and change US, which isn't bad at all. And you can use our link below to pick it up and help support the channel.